It was the end of 2007. I had recently wrapped up Christmas and was all set for my second semester in grade 10. I lived in Guelph, Ontario back then. It used to be an average city surrounded by a decent amount of country roads. I returned to school and was immediately greeted by Selena, my best friend at the time. We caught up, and with much excitement, she broke the news to me that she was dating someone, a new kid at our school. Selena and I knew each other since grade 6. I had seen her highs and lows through the years. We would keep each other in the loop about everything: our family issues, fights with parents, our grades, breakups, makeups, good days, bad days, and everything in between. For a while, we just lived a block away, so we'd walk back home from school and end up hanging out at her building's staircase to talk about our days. Those conversations would last hours. However, lately she wasn't having a good run. The guy she was dating before holidays was long distance, and I mean truly long distance. He was at the other end of the planet. She was a hopeless romantic, but even she knew it was a dead end. So, the fact she found someone who went to our school was a real good news. I was happy for her, and it felt like things would finally align within her romantic life. The next day, she introduced me to her new boyfriend. His name was Kevin. It was a brief meeting during lunchtime, but he seemed like a good guy. He was funny, upbeat, and charismatic. They looked good together, and even though they were together for barely a month, their vibe was well synced. As days went by, I'd be walking back home by myself, and I started to hear less and less from Selena. It didn't bother me, though. She was happy and in love, and we all know how big of a deal that is during our teenage. I respected her boundaries. On a Friday night in early March of 2008, my parents were out of town for the weekend. I was home alone playing video games and living my best life. It was around 10:45 p.m. and my home phone rang. I picked up, and it was Selena and Kevin on the other side. "Hey guys, what's happening?" I asked, confused. They never called me at this hour. No one called me at this hour. Kevin responded, "I've got my dad's car for the night, and we are going for a late-night drive. Care to join?" I found that to be a bit odd and thought he was joking. I confirmed with Selena, and she confirmed that they were serious about the spontaneous late-night trip and wanted me to be a part of it. I thought about it, had nothing better to do, so I took up on the offer. I waited in the lobby of my apartment building. They arrived by 11:15. It was a white minivan. It looked pretty worn out, but in that moment I didn't make anything of it. I tried to hop into the back seat, but Selena quickly got off the passenger seat and offered me to sit there, and she sat in the back seat instead. It happened so quickly, I went with it. We played loud music. He drove semi-recklessly, but it was all about fun at that age. I never even asked him if he had a valid license to drive. Thinking back, I don't think he did. 20 minutes into the drive, he took a random left turn on a country road. I lived in Guelph for a good chunk of my life, but never really came across this road or this area altogether. I asked him, "Do you know where you are going?" He replied, "Oh yeah, me and Selena drive around here all the time." I turned back to look at Selena to confirm, and she did not respond. At that time, not every teenager had a cell phone or a GPS, and we were those teenagers. If we got lost, there would be no way to find our way back. "It's late, man. We shouldn't drive out this far," I said firmly. He laughed and didn't seem to care. At that point, he came across slightly disconnected and detached from how I was feeling, and how his girlfriend was feeling as she was not saying a word. About 15 minutes later, still driving on that road, it got really dark. There were no lights or sign of any civilization in sight. The moon was shining bright, and that was the only source of illumination. Finally, Selena spoke up and said, "Kevin, we have never driven out this far. Let's go back, please. It's past midnight." However, Kevin was adamant and kept telling us he knows where he's going. Another 10 minutes went by. We were deep in the nowhere, surrounded by thick woods, and the roads turned into gravel. That is when he finally pulled over to the side and said, "This is it." "This is what, Kevin?" I asked confusedly. "You will see," he responded, and right after that, he turned off the ignition, took the keys, jumped off the minivan, and stood about 10 feet away from it, facing the front of the vehicle. He just stared at us without saying a word. The headlights were off. We could barely see him. The only visual we had of him was due to the moonlight. I asked Selena, "What is happening right now?" She looked as shocked and confused as me. She had no idea and was horrified by what was taking place. I figured it would be a good idea to get out of the vehicle and confront him. I ran that by Selena, and she agreed. Selena and I exited the vehicle at the same time. We both shut our doors, and she walked ahead of me trying to talk to him. But in that very moment, he used his remote key to lock the doors of the minivan and quickly ran off into the woods. Selena and I were shocked to the point that our bodies froze. She looked at me and I ran back to the minivan trying to open it, but to no avail. It was locked.
Is he pranking us?
I screamed. It took us a moment to realize that we were in the middle of nowhere, past midnight, with no phones or means to call for help. It was March, so winter hadn't fully left us yet. I got into survival mode and wanted to make sure we get back in the van as the cold temperature would not show mercy. Selena, however, was worried and wanted us to look for Kevin. We were surrounded by coyotes and it was by no means a safe place to be around. Still, I had absolutely zero urge to find Kevin. I wanted to find help and get her and myself home. Me and Selena ran up and down the road to look for a house, a farmhouse, anything exhibiting human life. We found nothing. No one. Soon after that, we looked in the direction Kevin had vanished into, and there was some illumination. It was definitely not the moonlight. Someone had set up a fire. Selena was thrilled and relieved. She thought it was all a joke and Kevin simply wanted to surprise us with some sort of a camping situation. She looked at me and said,
"There we go. It all makes sense now."
I looked at her, not affirming her conclusion. I was not having it. Something felt awfully wrong here. She ran towards the fire that was lit about 25 meters away. I couldn't leave her behind and there was nowhere to go anyways, so I ran after her. To be honest, I was sort of curious to find out what was happening. I got there probably half a second after Selena and I found Kevin, now dressed differently and surrounded by tools and supplies he certainly did not carry when he ran off. I started to put it together. Kevin had been here before, and this was all a setup. At this point, I was certain something horrible was about to happen. I slowly walked towards Selena, who was about 10 feet away from me. I wanted to hold her and tell her to run back. Kevin saw my movement and lunged at me. Selena stood there motionless, not knowing what to do. He overpowered me, but soon I gained control of the situation. Kevin had no way of knowing what my father did. He never really cared. That worked out because my father was a police officer for 20 years, and he had spent years teaching me how to tackle such situation. I managed to put Kevin in a headlock, but he would not give up. I started to feel he wanted to get away from me and attack Selena. He was angry and awfully resentful towards her. At a point, I had to hold him back from hurting her. I screamed her name and said, "Run!" She ran back towards the road, and I was left with no other option but to seriously hurt Kevin, so he stops. I pinned him down, grabbed one of his tools nearby that looked like a decent-sized flashlight and smashed it on his left knee several times. I did not stop till I was sure it is shattered. Once I was certain he could not chase me, I got off him and tried to find the keys to the minivan. I couldn't. I had an epiphany. I ran back to the minivan with that flashlight. I started to shatter its windows and breaking into it. That resulted in the most unpleasant, ugly alarm that came out of that minivan. It went on for a while, and thankfully, someone who lived a few hundred meters away heard it and decided to investigate. He drove to us, and I told him what had happened and begged him to call the police. Once the police arrived, we were asked to give statements, but we were in no shape to do so. They escorted us home. Paramedics took care of Kevin. Weeks later, we found out that Kevin absolutely was not the sweet, charming, upbeat guy we all thought he was. That was just a facade. In reality, he was jealous, manic, deeply insecure, and violent. Turns out, Selena had a male friend in her science lab she would hang out with for assignments and group projects, and that did not sit well with Kevin. He confronted her, but she didn't listen, and clearly told him that he cannot control her social life. It aggravated him even more. Not only he wanted to hurt her, but he also wanted to hurt every man in her life, including me. I don't know why he went to such extent that night. I don't know what he was planning to do. Whatever it was, one wrong move, one missed second, one ignored opportunity would have resulted in something awful. Now we are in our 30s. Selena and I are friends still, and we see each other from time to time. She never brings him up or what happened that night. It took her years of therapy to get over it. Not sure if she's still fully over it. In my case, I know where he lives, I know what he does, I know everything about him. I have no urge to go see him, but it's good to have that knowledge because one wrong move, one missed second, one ignored opportunity could result in something awful. This was a while ago. I used to drive this worn-out car I bought off my cousin about 5 years ago. It would need mechanical attention consistently, and I was fed up with it. However, considering my salary and circumstances back then, that's all I could afford. The car had introduced a very creative issue. Every time it would touch the speed of 90 kilometers, the engine would growl and shut down almost immediately. It won't turn back on for about 20 minutes. It was a hassle. I had a job interview in Toronto and I lived in London, Ontario. It's about a 3-hour drive. I got the interview call on a short notice, and it was too expensive for me to book a bus ride at that point. So I came up with a plan. I decided to take my car, but drive to Toronto through backcountry roads and not the highway. That way, I won't need to speed it up past 80 kilometers. It will take longer, but I will get there safely. The interview was on Wednesday, and I decided to leave on Tuesday and stay at my uncle for the night who lived in Toronto. I left around 4 p.m. and did not take the highway. The plan worked out splendidly. I reached there safely. The car did not break down on me even though I made stops along the way. Had dinner at my uncle's. Prepared for my interview once more and made sure I had all the documents I needed for the next day. Went to bed and had a restful night. Woke up in the morning, went for a run, showered, and had an amazing breakfast. Even though the office I had to get to was just 25 minutes away, I still took my uncle's car to avoid the risks associated with my car. Arrived at the interview and got done in about 45 minutes. Returned to my uncle's place. Later, him along with my cousins there decided to hang out, which was a normality each time I went to their place as we barely saw each other. We went for a movie, followed by dinner. I was so excited about how well the interview went, followed by the rest of the day, I completely forgot what a wreck my car is. It was 9 p.m. and I was still in Toronto. I quickly said my goodbyes and left for home. Now, the thing about driving between Toronto and London is that there's a lot of nothingness in the middle. You'd be okay on a highway, but through city and country roads, you'd constantly find yourself driving through fields and truly secluded roads. Those roads are scenic during the daytime, but quite eerie at night. I left Toronto, crossed Milton in about an hour, and still had about 2 hours to go. At this point, I found myself in the middle of nowhere, just dark back roads taking me from one city to another. I was driving patiently. Soon, I saw a gas station on the side of the road and decided to pull in for some gas. I like to buy one of those iced teas and chips during such drives, so got them too, and I was on the road right away. 15 minutes in the drive, still on the dark country road, I saw a car coming up behind me at a high rate of speed. I looked into my rearview mirror and figured it would simply pass me like most cars do. That did not happen. It slowed down and matched my speed about 3 car lengths behind me and began to high beam me. I could not drive any faster than I already was. If I did, I'd be risking being stranded in the middle of nowhere due to the condition of my car. Even though it was a 1-lane road, I tried to swerve to the right and left, allowing him to pass me. He kept pacing me. At this point, it was just him and me on that road. Due to the headlights beaming at me, I could not make out the kind of motor vehicle he was driving. 10 to 12 minutes had passed by, and he was still tailgating me. I was annoyed and weirded out by him, so I decided to pull over to my right onto the shoulder so he could pass me and essentially leave me alone. So I did just that. I gave my right indicator, slowed down, pulled over to the right shoulder, giving him all the space to drive through. I stopped. He did pass me, but as he did, he slowed down. At this point, I could see it was a gray pickup truck. It looked old and not washed in weeks. I observed the truck to slow down even more, and at a distance of maybe 10 cars, it came to a full stop in the middle of the road. Seeing that, 1,000 things went through my mind. Is he just messing with me? Does he want to talk? Is he upset? Now I am stuck in a road rage situation? I wasn't sure what to do. Still, I went with my instincts and took pictures of the number plate. I waited for a few minutes that felt like eternity. No one stepped out of that vehicle, and there was no way I was going to approach him. It started to freak me out. I decided to drive past him. As I put my car into drive mode, my lights turned on and illuminated the back of the truck. I looked at the rear windshield and noticed something strange. I felt like there was someone looking back at me. I thought about it and finally gathered courage to turn on my high beam to clearly see what was behind that rear windshield of the truck. I shouldn't have done that. I immediately saw a face pushed against the glass from the inside of the pickup truck. I could tell it was a man. He looked mid-aged, bald, eyes wide open, staring at me like an animal looks at its prey. He looked angry, and the scariest part was, his lips were moving as if he is talking. I slowly came to realize that he was not talking. He was yelling. He was flailing his hands and pointing fingers at me while screaming aggressively, and all of that was directed towards me. On one hand, I was scared. On the other, I was thinking, he must know that I can't hear him, right? We are in our vehicles with windows up and few meters away from each other. It just freaked me out more. This person was unstable. I quickly took a U-turn and decided to aim for that gas station I was at a few minutes ago. I thought, even if I end up calling the police, it would be easier for them to find me there than anywhere else in the middle of nowhere. I completed my U-turn and started driving. I looked into the rearview mirror, hoping he won't be there. To my horror, he was behind me, matching my speed with high beams on. As I was driving in fear, my general instinct was to drive as fast as I possibly could, but I had to keep my speed below 90 kilometers, and that was agonizing. I grabbed my phone and called 911.
911, what's your emergency, please?
I told the operator the whole situation and shared the location of the gas station I'd be at. I also shared the plate number of the truck. They gave me a vague ETA, but I was hopeful to see them at the gas station before I reach. I finally made it to the gas station, and to my disappointment, the police wasn't there. I thought, at least I won't be alone there. But it had closed by then. There was absolutely no one present. I pulled in the gas station as I wasn't sure what else to do. My car was facing the road, and for a minute I didn't see anyone approaching. Then, I saw the same truck driving towards the gas station at a very sinister and slow speed. Once his driver's window was facing my vehicle, he stopped and pulled on the side of the road and stayed there. There was no activity from his end, but I was extremely aware that I'm being stared at by someone who is possibly out of his mind and potentially dangerous. I could feel his ominous energy. With my eyes fixated on him, I called the 911 again, and the operator told me it'll be a while, as a few other emergencies came up that took priority over my situation. I was devastated. I thought if I stay stationary and don't move, maybe nothing would happen, and before I know it, the police will arrive. Few minutes went by and something horrifying happened. There was a dark field opposite the gas station at the other side of the road. I observed shadow-like movements. I couldn't tell if my mind is playing tricks on me or there are actual human figures coming out of the darkness. I rubbed my eyes, and the moving figures did not go away. To be certain, I turned on the high beam again. Right away, I saw about 7 men dressed like lumberjacks sneaking out of the field. They all had a strange expression, as if they were manically happy to see me. Wide eyes and wide smiles, slowly approaching me. Soon after that, the man from the gray truck stepped out of the vehicle and just stared at me angrily. I did my due diligence. I was 24 and by no means a big guy. I realized the only thing that could save me was my car. I won't be able to defend myself if I stay put. I'd need to take the risk. I'd need to drive it as fast as I can. So I did. The gas station was 5 minutes away from the highway. I was avoiding it earlier, but now I had to take my chance. I put my gear in drive mode and sped onto the road through all those men. I may have slightly hit one of them, I'm not sure. I made the turn I needed to get to the highway. I got to the ramp, took it, merged on the highway, and slowly began to speed up. I saw the rear view mirror and the truck was behind me yet again. I was on survival mode and something in me told me to speed up without fear. So I did, and eventually my speed surpassed 90 kilometers. I was on 100, then on 120, and then on 140. Surprisingly, my car did not let me down. Despite its issue, I could drive it as fast as I wanted to, and trust me, I did just that. I did not care if I got pulled over by police. That would actually work out for me. I was blazing through the highway, changing lanes and overtaking other vehicles. I kept checking my rearview mirror, and after about 15 minutes, I did not see that pickup truck behind me. That was the best feeling. I didn't slow down, though. I kept driving at a very high speed till I took my exit. I got home, parked my vehicle in my garage, and rushed in. I was finally safe. I stayed up all night replaying the whole event and wondering what that man in the truck or all those men in the field planned to do. None of it made sense. The next day, I tried to drive my car, and it did not work. It had died completely. It felt like it paid the price to get me home safely. I felt a strange sense of loss and found myself thanking it for assisting me grandly for one last time. Many years have gone by. I have a much better job and a reliable vehicle. Still, to this day, I do my best to avoid backcountry roads. Nothing has matched up to the horror of that night and to the loyalty of that car of mine.